First talk?
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me, everybody. It's my first kind of presentation, so happy to be here. Uh, so just to give a brief background about me, I graduated here from UTSA in 2019 with my bachelor's in cybersecurity. I currently work as an advanced security engineer for Secure Yeti, which is a small company. We do a bunch of red teaming, purple teaming, blue teaming, web apps. We do kind of everything. Excuse me. We're both on the commercial and the government side, so we do a little bit of everything with NIST related and stuff of that nature. Some fun facts about me. Right now, I'm ranked 72 on Integrity's bug bounty program, which is kind of essentially the European side of like HackerOne and BugCrowd. Currently, I also hold several certifications. I hold the OSCP, OSEP, eLearn Securities, EC, PP2, V2, Security Plus, some Red Teaming certs, and the AWS Security cert. And just a fun fact about me, I actually spent my freshman year of college playing basketball in a small school in Kansas. So kind of took an untraditional route. Had no idea what I was going to do in my life and kind of ended up being a pen tester. This is so like the kind of the story, right, or the point of this presentation is just to talk about kind of my experiences, how some of the obstacles I faced, kind of graduating from UTSA, kind of breaking into the cyber field, which is kind of a hard thing to do, right? Everyone says like cybersecurity is the wave, stuff like that, but the job market is just like saturated with people that are experienced, so it's hard for like the newer gen to kind of get into it. So we'll kind of talk about stuff like that, kind of what I did to try to get out of that, make myself kind of separate from everybody else, and then we'll talk about a kind of a case study of a pen test that I did this year. So trying to give you a taste of everything, kind of what I do day to day. Uh, so for the first one, right? Wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I took the cybersecurity course here at UTSA, and I think my senior year, I ended up taking the attack and defend class. Not sure if that's still offered here, but our capstone class was essentially pretty cool. We had to do anything that we learned in the class, and what I ended up doing was kind of my first introduction into C2. So I ended up actually developing a C sharp executable that gets uploaded to Virus Total, and it ended up sending data back. So it had no C2 open source data. It was just kind of me learning, kind of understand, kind of Windows operating systems and getting that sent back to an AWS EC2 instance. So once I did that, I was like, okay, I think this is kind of what I wanted to do. Another thing, right? I have a 5-year-old little girl, and around this time she was just born, so didn't have the opportunity to do extracurricular activities, kind of as my peers were doing. So such as like the cyber team and stuff of that nature. So it was just work and school. So kind of hindered me and kind of gave me an obstacle compared to those who were competing in those. Um, Once I kind of got out of school, I was kind of lucky. I guess I could take a step back. My senior year, I ended up actually getting an internship for WellMed. It wasn't a cyber internship, but it was more of an IT internship. So it gave me the opportunity, right, to kind of get my foot into corporate America. But even though it wasn't in IT or a cyber field, I was kind of doing application development. So I was able to apply kind of the concepts that I was learning in the class and being able to put that on a resume, right? Since those are talking points. So once I was doing that, I think I did it for about a year. They offered me the job after I graduated, so I was like, "This isn't for me." So I started applying for junior positions, and I would definitely say resume filters are definitely real because I never got calls back. And in the next slide here, you kind of see it may be kind of small, but this is a quick junior pen testing role that's available right now. You can kind of see the requirements, right? Even though that this is a junior pen test, they want 2 to 3 years kind of experience in the field as well as a certification. These certifications are very expensive. So this was kind of like I started to notice this, and I was like, well, they need a certificate or a cert, right? So again, this is not a financial advice, but since we're all kind of young, right, we credits are very minimal. So what I ended up doing was getting a credit card that had the 0% interest for a year or whatever, and I ended up applying for those and got it and paid for a certification. Again, not financial advice, but it's just a way to invest in yourself, right? Because this is gonna get you to where you want to be. So again, like I said, I went down the road of getting these certifications. I also started building like my own home lab. I ended up getting or building a PC, wasn't too crazy, and ended up kind of putting Proxmox on there, which is kind of another open source tool to be able to put virtual machines in a kind of a bigger concept. Um, Once I started doing that, right, you kind of have to teach yourself since you're not in those roles. So I got to, I mean, since I knew I wanted to do pen testing, right, you before you can become a pen tester, you have to understand like how these softwares and stuff integrate together and how they're legitimately used before breaking them. So I ended up doing that and also started to grab these certifications, right? So I ended up going through CompTIA to get Security Plus, um, eLearn Security, which is now INE. I grabbed a few of those certifications, and finally, like the big one, which is everyone's probably heard of, is Offensive Security. Here in the screenshot, the crazy thing is the first time I took my OSCP, I ended up failing. So I ended up putting the email that you get that you didn't make it. I know it's changed quite recently, so now it's more Active Directory based and stuff like that. But when I ended up taking it, it was 5 machines. Two of them were rated kind of hard, with one being a buffer overflow and one medium. No, two medium, sorry, and one easy. The goal is you have to get about 80 points within 24 hours. Submit a report another 24, and you pass or fail. Now it's a little bit different, right? It's kind of that same mentality, but now it has Active Directory, which now everyone is using. Pretty sure if you haven't heard of it, you're still probably using here at UTSA. Just being able to log in with your ABC 123 through multiple machines in the environment. So, yep. And once I ended up actually passing my OSCP, I ended up getting phone calls back. People wanted to talk to me now since I had that piece of paper. And so it's definitely worth going if you want to go down the pen testing road. And it's going to be hard. I'm going to be honest with you. People are not going to want to give you that opportunity when they don't have to train you, when they can just bring someone else that has experience. But you having to take that road, whether that be certification route or being able to build a home portfolio and just being able to talk to these points right in the resume once someone actually calls you back is very key. um some of the overall like daily responsibility, right, of a pen tester, like it's not all just hands on keyboard, right? So for example, like every day, when you're on an engagement, you're going to be talking to your clients periodically, right? Whether that be talking about some of the IOCs that you're generating in the environment. They're going to be asking, are you doing this malicious traffic in the environment? Just being able to talk to them saying, hey, we know what we're doing, everything's calm. uh, a big thing, right, is the drafting of the deliverables. You're getting paid not to do the pen test, but you're getting paid to be able to create a report that is not only for the technical people that are paying you, but the people that are paying them, right? Like the C-suite, being able to talk to people that probably don't know how to use your laptop other than send emails. So being able to be well versed, not only technical but business wise, those are, and being able to put that into a piece of paper or PowerPoint or just verbal thing is very key. Again, the actual hands-on keyboard is another major thing. So being able to actually execute the work and being able to get around the security defenses that are in place, whether that be EDR, AV, some of the data exfiltration or data protection software that are now currently in play. And finally, another big thing, right? You want to stay relevant. Um, threat actors come out all the time with new techniques. You want to be able to not only understand them, but be able to maybe reverse engineer it, get an understanding of what is actually occurring behind that technique, and being able to actually produce this in the environment, right? Because at the end of the day, these people that are working on the blue team side are paying you to perform these techniques, so that way they're able to detect them and better mitigate. Because at the end of the day, a company's biggest risk is not like the software endpoints that are out there. It's the people behind it, right? So just being able to make sure that everyone is aware of it. And the big thing, right, is just being able to do the reports, because when you're doing the reports, it's going to come back. You want to make sure that it's perfect, because at the end of the day, like that's what the client's taking home. So you just want to be able to know that whatever you're sending out there, you want to be comfortable knowing that your name is going to be on there, because it's ultimately your work. Uh, so finally, we'll go through kind of a case study, right, of what we did. Probably in the summer. Um, this client is, so the state auditors of a state paid us to perform a pen test on their university system. So it's kind of similar to what the UT system is. So like you have a variety of universities varying in size, kind of similar to how it's UT Austin, UTSA, UTEP, UT Dallas, UT Arlington. So like various sizes. Um, we ended up the goal of the objective was to try to get in from the external, which included all the schools. But then from the internal perspective, we selected different schools. So based on the security maturity, how many students are in there and stuff of that nature. So we selected a select few. But again, the overall goal was to get in from the external, get in, and ultimately the way that this network was set up is that a bunch of their sensitive information was in the data centers of one of the major schools that was close to the state auditors group. So that was the objective was to get into there. Um, we'll talk kind of just geared towards one of the internals based off of the first school that we touched. But just to give a summary, we ended up getting or finding multiple ways in from the external. And again, like since this is a school and everyone here is a student here, universities are kind of a unique landscape for threat actors to attack, whether that be because you're doing research, right? A lot of times universities are producing research for like government agencies, stuff of that nature. So threat actors, especially if they're state sponsored and stuff of that nature, they want to target the schools and the people that actually are authenticating to university systems is unique, right? Because you have students, you have faculty, you have staff, and again, these researchers that may not be employed through the school, but they're doing research and paid through third parties. Again, those are accounts that threat actors are focusing on. So it's a very unique threat landscape that we're focusing on. So um, we ended up getting again, like I said, through the external multiple ways. Here, once we got in, we made sure that we were able to collaborate with the team, make sure that these accounts weren't previously breached. So we made sure we closed all those holes, and then we had them kind of create a, a standard account that we knew that it was a test account. So here you can see that this was one of the accounts that were provisioned for us. I'm using a tool called Bloodhound here to kind of visualize some of the group memberships that this user had. Um, again, nothing too special. What LDAP does essentially is just it'll query or perform LDAP queries from whatever machine that you're using from an account that is has access to that machine and be able to query and obtain all the access. So it's nothing special here. Once we had this access assigned to us, we kind of performed some initial discovery, kind of see, hey, we have this account, nothing special about it. What can we access in the environment? So we use a tool called NetExec. It's kind of similar or the newer version of CrackMap Exec. Essentially, what this is doing is it's you give it a sub range of kind of a number of IPs that are in the environment and say, hey, can we access any of these machines? It may be kind of hard to see here, but there's a black dots and the workstation was called BB Workstation. It ended up being a Blackboard workstation that anyone could get into, and it looked like any account in the environment had local administrative access. So you can kind of see here that we ended up getting RDP access to the machine. So once we identified that we had local admin access to one machine, 9 out of 10 times it's going to be periodically through the environment. So we scanned the different sub range and ended up identifying several machines in the environment that we had local administrative access. So once we were on the systems, right, the next thing an attacker is going to do is we're going to start looking through those file systems, trying to look for sensitive information. I would say probably 75% of times employees are using their work machines for personal use. So here you can see that we ended up finding an Excel sheet. This was an assistant registrar user account, and they had not only their corporate emails and passwords, but stuff to log into their credit card information. Um, again, it may be kind of hard to see, but this row here was the passwords of these accounts. Again, like what I said earlier, the biggest risk or vulnerability within an organization is their users. Again, you can see here, again, it may be kind of hard, but the passwords are pretty much the same throughout. And again, if you're using a password that's the same through your various personal accounts, you got to believe at some point that account is going to be breached and it's going to be exposed, whether that be the dark web or a public dump or whatnot. So being able to use that same password is going to work in several accounts. So once we got into this account, we kind of went back and did the same process. And we were able to identify, well, this user had multiple access to various machines on the environment. So again, kind of did the same process. We ended up landing on a machine for a director. This one was different, right? This was a CSV file rather than being an Excel sheet. So ended up just using Linux's capability to read it. And again, we obtained the password and ended up confirming that that credential was working. Kind of the same process. Usually, when you're a director, right, you have more access to resources in the environment. And sure enough, once we got in there, we ended up finding a XML file that is used for network systems to kind of provision Windows machines in the environment. So this had clear text credentials of a domain account that was used for their technology service system. So that was a pretty privileged account in their environments. And again, right, using Bloodhound, Bloodhound allows you to visualize and hunt attack paths in the environment. So you can see that this help desk group was a member of the account operators group. This account operators group had a generic all access to an MSO account. Essentially, what generic all access means that you have the capability to perform write access or any pretty much any type of administrative modifications to an account. And then that MSO account had write access to the domain administrators group, which is essentially the keys to the kingdom of an environment. Um, yep. So the first right, we wanted to end up try to take over that MSO account. So what we ended up doing was using a tool to kind of minimize the downtime or affecting that MSO account because the MSO account is a account that is generated or created for you when organizations are using synchronization from on-prem to the cloud. So again, we didn't want to minimize it. We didn't want to change the password and cause an outage in the environment. So we ended up using shadow credentials. Essentially, what shadow credentials means is that it's an alternate way to authenticate to the environment using certificates, which is pretty much Active Directory certificate services. So once we had that certificate for that MSO account, we were able again to kind of use some special Kerberos delegations attack and able to obtain the NT password hash. Essentially, what that NT hash is just an RC4 encryption of the clear text credential of that user, and it is a Windows default as of now that you have the ability to authenticate using an NT hash rather than a clear text password. So that essentially meant right that we were able to compromise that account and become or have access as that MSO account. Again, this slide just kind of reiterating that what that MSO account is used for, why it's created, and kind of how you can kind of understand right that how um, important this account is because it's performing the password synchronization from the cloud to on-prem and vice versa. So once we had that NT hash right of the MSO account, we essentially passed that hash for that account. And then once we were there, we were able to obtain a beacon or kind of using C2. In this little screenshot here, we used Havoc, which is an open source C2 channel. Once we got in, we were able, since we had generic write access to the domain administrators group, we were able to add ourselves in, and essentially there we were able to perform a domain controller synchronization attack and obtain all the password hashes. This one was a very unique one, right? Because since it is a state auditor funded program, they use one of the best EDR systems, which is, in my opinion, Cortex, Palo Alto's Cortex system. It's a very unique thing, right? Because when you authenticate to the environment, they're able to perform dynamic route assignments. So, for example, someone in HR may not be able to reach the same things as someone who is a teacher for like math or something of that nature. So it's a very complex network. But once we got in, we were essentially able to compromise the environment. And this was just one case study. A full summary, we were able to actually compromise the entire system, and we ended up getting some calls late at night from Palo Alto's threat team, being able to communicate with them, and we were able to kind of talk through some of the evasions we did and stuff like that. I didn't include any of that. I just wanted to kind of give a high level of what kind of a pen test was. Again, this was probably, at least this was part of one of the easier portions of it. Obviously, like, having to perform the research and design of some custom executables to get stuff called back, as well as being able to actually perform these techniques were time that took away from it. But all in all, just wanted to give a brief case study of it. Some of the takeaways, right? I would definitely say like you cannot be afraid to fail. Um, again, it's gonna be hard, right? Especially coming out of college. Like if you don't have that internship or your foot already in the door, it's gonna be very difficult. And I would just definitely say if you can't get an opportunity, try to make your way, whether that be again through building your home lab, being able to network with people, being able to perform an internship with someone, even if it's free for a while, right? Like just being able to get that valuable experience, it will go a long way. And I tell my daughter this all the time, but like you just have to run your own race, right? You can't compare yourself against somebody because at the end of the day, that's gonna um bear you down because then you feel like, oh well, this person's succeeding. Like it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? So at some point you're gonna be able to pass them, hopefully, or just continue to grow. And I included some links, right? I'm very big because again, I didn't have like anyone kind of in my corner. I didn't have anyone that I was able to talk to like cyberwise. So when I do get the time, I like to write some blog posts, kind of some stuff that I do. So I have a medium thing, and I've done a couple of YouTube videos, nothing too crazy, but some of them was my bug bounty stuff. So just wanted to put that out there. But I'll stop and ask if there's any questions or anything I can address and kind of help you all out. Nope. Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, for sure. So for example, right, a lot of times, like EDR systems, they're using cloud-based stuff. So it's a proven fact, right? You don't want to put an EDR system that's on a hardware, an endpoint, and it's gonna use a bunch of your CPU to scan it, right? So a lot of times we'll bloat these files, we just will like just random no bytes and stuff of that nature. That way, it's gonna skip it because it doesn't want to hinder that user experience, right? Because then people are gonna be upset knowing that well, I'm paying all this money and my user can't open Excel or anything like that, or there are 30 Chrome tabs. So that's a big way that we're able to bypass these things. That's all question. It's a Yep. So that's a good question. This project was scoped for 3 months. We were able to compromise the entire environment within from like start to finish, maybe like a month. But we ended up so since we had those 2 months right in advance, we went from a red team to a purple team. So again, like we like to go slow and steady. We want to test our detections, make sure that they're getting their money's worth from whatever security products that they're using. And then after that, we start getting a little bit noisier, saying, "Hey, make sure you're seeing this. We're doing stuff like this." It ended up being that one of the universities they actually had exclusions in place on their Cortex systems because I guess they just got an EA team or a sports team, so they had I guess the software that they were trying to run to play the games and stuff and play competitively, they were having difficulty and there was a tournament coming up, so they ended up shutting it down for a few weeks and they weren't just getting the logs to their sim. So it's stuff like that, right? Like again, people being the biggest vulnerability in their environments and just being able to identify, hey, like we need to start changing your processes, your change management and stuff of that nature to kind of help prevent this in the future. So yeah, yes sir. Mhm. Oh, yep. So essentially, right, a bunch of these EDR programs they go based off the Active Directory. So we were essentially able to add ourselves to those groups and get in. We don't like to make those modifications unless we have like written stuff in our statements of work just to kind of prevent that. But yeah, exactly. But in most of these pen tests, right, like you want to try to take the step that's least resistant. But there's times too, right, where we just recently did a ransomware threat or a ransomware simulation. So we'll get in and then we'll once we get in, we'll meet with our POC, which is normally just one person on the team, and they'll make a clone of a file share that we're going to go after, and then we'll try to ransomware that and see, hey, did you see this? Did you prevent this? What were some of the steps taken about the account actually performing this and stuff of that nature? So it's interesting, right? Like kind of the things that attackers are going to go for and how organizations are willing to simulate these type of techniques because an attacker's not going to stop the piece of paper is not signed. So yep, exactly. That's a good question. Oh, yeah, yeah, yes. Oh, No, that's a good question. So after my freshman year when I was in Kansas, my grandma got sick, and she was sick before I went, but she didn't. It was my goal, right, to play college basketball, so she didn't want to stop me. But it just got to the point where her health was kind of diminishing a little bit, so I ended up coming back. I ended up taking some classes at Northwest Vista. Again, like I had no idea. Playing basketball in college is kind of hard, right, because your schedule has to go based off your practice and your trainings and stuff, so you're very limited. But I think when I was at Vista first, I was trying to do criminal justice, but I ended up taking a computer class and I was like, well, let's go down this way. And I haven't looked back, right? Because a lot of times when you're in business and criminal justice, it's the same thing every day. Here, it's different completely every single day. So it's something that keeps you on your toes. And if you want to be successful in this field, you have to be willing not only to change yourself, but align with what the market and the industry is doing. So yeah, good question. Oh, in the
Yeah,
back.
so along with your vulnerability testing, were you also charged with the responsibility of developing mitigation possibilities? And if so, at what point along the vulnerability testing did you discover this would be a strategy for mitigation?
Can you say that last part again?
At what point, if you are charged with the responsibility of developing mitigation, at what point along that vulnerability testing did you discover this would be our best strategy for mitigation?
Yep. So normally the way we classify our findings, right? So like a lot of times like organizations are following frameworks on risk. So like they'll have like a critical finding will have probably 7 days to mitigate on the product owners, and it'll kind of go from there. 2 weeks for a high, a month for a medium, and months for the low. The way we kind of try to separate ourselves, right? Because a lot of times, so when I first got out of school or my first pen testing gig, I was at a big four company, and now where I'm at now, Secure Yeti, there's probably like 9 of us, 10 of us. So it's different, right? So like, say we find a SQL injection. If I found a SQL injection at my previous employer, we would have probably classified that as a critical. But here, right, if we're able to actually execute a SQL injection, but we're not able to escalate to a system administrator on the machine, or we're not able to exfiltrate like production data, then that's going to be a minimal risk, right? So why would we strain I guess the developers to apply a quick fix on that when that could probably have other people focused on it and stuff of that nature. I don't know if that answered your question. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So I have a question. What's your perspective on AI, like within the realm of pen testing? Do you think it's beneficial? Are you incorporating it into your daily workflow? Like, what's that process like?
Yep. So that's a good question. So like a lot of times we have organizations trying to integrate with Azure's AI and stuff since they're already playing. They're applying or paying for Azure's like top enterprise software. So it comes with it, right? But personally, we try to stay away from AI just because due to the fact that like that data is being sent off and being absorbed from it. We do some a little bit of AI testing, and primarily when you're testing AI, you're trying to look for prompt injection, right? You're trying to look for the data that's in there stored somewhere that's being learned and trying to get it to output to you, or being able to bypass whatever what's the word, like defense strategies in there, right? Because sometimes they'll have like, well, don't put client data in here, but again, the biggest risk in an organization is the client. They're still going to put it in there and it's going to be safe somewhere. So just trying to exfiltrate that out. But yeah, it's going to be interesting though, I would definitely say down the line. Is there any more? Okay. Thank you everybody for your time. I hope you enjoyed it.